Amina woke to the soft murmur of voices just outside her room. She kept her eyes closed, her breathing slow, listening. The voices were careful, restrained, like people discussing something dangerous. "The paperwork is confirmed," a man said quietly. "And the transfer?" another asked. "Already processed. She doesn't know the full extent yet." Amina's heart began to race. The door opened gently. Mrs. Adami stepped in again, followed by the same two men from before. This time, they carried themselves differently, more cautious, almost deferential. "You're awake," Mrs. Adami said, noticing Amina's open eyes. "Yes," Amina replied. "I read the documents." Mrs. Adami nodded. "Then you know the truth can no longer be hidden." Amina swallowed. "I don't understand why now." "Because the board meeting is today," one of the men said. "And decisions will be made that directly affect you." Amina's brow furrowed. "What kind of decisions?" Mrs. Adami exchanged a look with the men before answering. "The company Daniel works for is about to announce a new executive structure." Amina froze. "Daniel," she whispered. "Yes," Mrs. Adami said carefully. "He believes he is being promoted, but what he doesn't know is that the final authority rests with you." Amina's hands trembled. "I never wanted revenge." "This isn't revenge," Mrs. Adami said firmly. "This is truth." Amina looked down at her belly, then back up. "What if I refuse?" "You can't," one of the men replied gently. "Not anymore. Your signature is already part of the system. You are the system." A long silence followed. Across town, Daniel sat in the boardroom, confidence radiating from every movement. He adjusted his tie, scanning the faces around the table. He recognized most of the men who once ignored him, now nodding respectfully. Sandra sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his knee. "This is it," she whispered. "You're finally going to be acknowledged." Daniel smirked. "They can't ignore me anymore." The chairman cleared his throat. "We'll begin shortly. We're just waiting for confirmation from the hospital." Daniel frowned slightly. "Hospital?" "Yes," the chairman said casually. "A procedural formality." Daniel leaned back, uneasy, but still composed. Back in the hospital, a nurse entered Amina's room with fresh clothes neatly folded in her arms. "Expensive clothes. I didn't ask for these," Amina said. "They were ordered," the nurse replied softly. By the board, Amina stared at the clothes, overwhelmed. Mrs. Adami stepped closer. "Today, they will speak your name in rooms you were never allowed to enter." Amina shook her head slowly. "Daniel will hate me." Mrs. Adami's voice hardened. "He already discarded you." Amina closed her eyes, tears slipping free. At that moment, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Yes, Mr. Daniel Okoye." A calm voice said, "Please remain seated. There has been a slight change to today's agenda." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What kind of change?" "You'll find out shortly." The line went dead. Daniel looked around the room. Something in the air had shifted. The smiles felt forced, the whispers sharper. And for the first time since morning, doubt crept into his chest. Hours later, Amina was wheeled out of the hospital through a private exit. The sunlight felt foreign on her skin. A black car waited outside. A driver stepped forward, opening the door. "I can walk," Amina said softly. Mrs. Adami smiled. "I know, but today, you don't have to." As the car pulled away, Amina stared out the window at the city she once felt swallowed by. Everything looked the same, but she felt different. At the company building, the boardroom doors opened. Executives straightened in their seats. "We'll begin," the chairman said. "First, an announcement." Daniel leaned forward, ready. "There has been a change in leadership," the chairman continued. "Effective immediately." Sandra squeezed Daniel's hand excitedly. "Due to previously undisclosed ownership arrangements," the chairman said, "the company will now answer to a new chief executive. Authority." Daniel's smile faltered. The doors at the back of the room opened. Everyone turned. Daniel's heart stopped. Amina stood there. She wore a simple but elegant dress. Her hair was neatly styled, her posture calm, dignified. Mrs. Adami walked beside her. Sandra gasped. What is she doing here? Daniel stood abruptly. This is a mistake. Amina didn't look at him. She walked slowly toward the head of the table, her hand resting protectively on her belly. This meeting, the chairman said, is now under her authority. Daniel laughed nervously. You're joking. Mrs. Adami placed a folder on the table. We don't joke about ownership. Daniel grabbed the folder, flipping through it frantically. His face drained of color. No, he whispered. This can't be her. Amina finally met his eyes. Hello, Daniel, she said quietly. The room was silent. Sandra stood up. This is some kind of sick joke. Amina turned to her calmly. Please sit down. Sandra froze. Daniel's mind raced. You're lying, he said hoarsely. You were begging outside this building yesterday. Yes, Amina replied. And you turned your back on me? Daniel's chest tightened. How is this possible? Amina took a breath. You never asked where I came from. You only cared about where I couldn't go. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an internal message confirming the transfer. He stared at the screen, hands shaking, meeting adjourned. The chairman said softly. Executives stood in stunned silence as Amina was escorted out. Daniel sank back into his chair, his world tilting. That evening, Daniel paced his apartment restlessly. Sandra watched him from the couch, irritation growing. You're overreacting, she said. This won't last. Daniel stopped. She owns everything, Sandra scoffed. So, we'll find a way. Daniel stared at the city lights through the window, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. He remembered Amina's face as she stood there calm, composed, powerful. And for the first time, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. What if he had destroyed the only person who could have saved him? He clenched his fists. Outside, the city slept. Inside, Daniel's fear had just begun. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the darkened wall across from him. Sandra slept behind him, her breathing slow and steady, completely unaware or uncaring about the storm raging inside his head. Amina. Her face kept replaying in his mind, not the woman he had humiliated outside the building, not the desperate, exhausted version he had dismissed as a problem, but the woman who stood in the boardroom calm, controlled, untouchable. The way she had said his name, not with anger, not with begging, with certainty. Daniel ran a hand through his hair and stood up. He poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. His phone buzzed again on the counter, an internal company. Email. All department heads are to report directly to the office of the CEO, effective immediately. CEO. He swallowed hard. There was no title next to her name in the email. Just her name, Amina Bello. Daniel felt something twist painfully in his chest. How long had this been planned? How long had she known? Questions piled up faster than answers. By morning, the office buzzed with rumors. Employees whispered in hallways, phones glued to their hands. No one laughed. No one joked. The usual arrogance in the air had been replaced by unease. Daniel walked through the lobby, feeling eyes on his back. People who once greeted him enthusiastically now avoided his gaze. He entered his office and shut the door. Minutes later, a knock. Yes, he snapped. The door opened cautiously. It was his assistant. Mr. O. You've been requested in the executive conference room. Daniel's jaw tightened. By who? She hesitated. By her. He nodded stiffly. Tell her I'll be there. As the door closed, Daniel's hands trembled slightly. He clenched them into fists, forcing himself to breathe. Across the building, Amina sat in a spacious office she had never imagined occupying. The walls were lined with books and modern art. Sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows. She felt small in the large chair, but she didn't let it show. Mrs. Adami stood beside her. You're doing well, she said quietly. Amina nodded, though her heart pounded. I don't feel ready. No one ever does, Mrs. Adami replied. But power doesn't wait for readiness. A knock came at the door. Send him in, Amina said softly. The door opened, Daniel stepped inside. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Daniel looked different now. His shoulders were tense, his confidence cracked around the edges. You wanted to see me, he said carefully. Yes, Amina replied. Sit. He hesitated, then sat across from her. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Amina raised an eyebrow. Tell you what? That you owned everything, he said, his voice rising slightly. That you were this. Amina leaned forward slightly. When I stood outside this building yesterday, did you ask me anything? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. I came to you as a woman in need, Amina continued calmly. You didn't ask how I survived. You didn't ask who helped me. You didn't ask where I came from. You only saw what you wanted to see. Daniel clenched his jaw. I didn't know. No, Amina said softly. You didn't care. The words hit harder than any insult. Daniel swallowed. What do you want from me? Amina's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Nothing. That's not true, Daniel said. You didn't bring me here for nothing. Amina looked at him steadily. I brought you here because you worked for this company, and I expect professionalism. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. After everything. Yes, Amina said simply. After everything. She slid a folder across the desk. These are the terms of the new restructuring. Your department will be audited. Daniel's eyes widened. Audited? Completely, Amina replied. All decisions, all expenditures. Daniel felt a chill run through him. He had made choices, cut corners, favored allies, ignored protocols. You're trying to destroy me, he accused. Amina shook her head. I'm letting the truth speak for itself. He stared at her, searching for anger, for revenge, but there was none. That scared him more. Sandra burst into the office without knocking. You can't just. Mrs. Adayemi stepped forward sharply. This is a restricted meeting. Sandra ignored her and pointed at Amina. You think this makes you important? You were nothing yesterday. Amina stood slowly, her posture steady. Yesterday, I was pregnant and hungry. Today, I am pregnant and informed. Sandra scoffed. Daniel, say something. Daniel didn't move. Get out, Amina said quietly. Sandra laughed. Or what? Amina looked at Mrs. Adayemi. Escort her out. Two security officers appeared almost instantly. Sandra's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. Amina met her eyes. I dare to protect my workplace. As Sandra was escorted out, screaming protests echoed down the hallway. Daniel stared at the floor. This didn't have to happen like this, he muttered. Amina sighed. Neither did the way you ended our marriage. Silence fell again. Daniel stood slowly. I underestimated you. Yes, Amina replied. You did. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Is the baby mine? Amina didn't answer immediately. Then she said, that question mattered yesterday. Daniel's chest tightened as he walked out. Fear wrapped itself fully around him. For the first time, he understood something clearly. Amina wasn't trying to hurt him. She didn't need to. She had already won. Daniel left the office, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The hallway seemed longer, quieter. Every step echoed too loudly, as if the building itself was listening. Employees pretended to be busy, but he could feel their eyes on him. The same people who once laughed at his jokes now avoided him like a stain they feared might spread. When the elevator doors closed, Daniel finally exhaled, but it came out shaky. His phone vibrated. Again, a message from Human Resources. Please confirm your availability for a full compliance review scheduled tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, his throat went dry. By the time he reached his car, his confidence had completely crumbled. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, gripping it tightly. Replaying every decision he had made over the past 2 years. Every shortcut, every deal. Every time he had dismissed someone because he felt untouchable. Amina. Her calm voice haunted him more than anger ever could. That evening, Sandra stormed into the apartment, throwing her bag onto the couch. Do you know what people are saying about us? Daniel didn't look up. I don't care, you don't care, she snapped. That woman humiliated me. She didn't raise her voice. Daniel replied quietly. You humiliated yourself. Sandra froze. What did you just say? Daniel stood and faced her. You walked into her office like you owned it. You don't. Sandra's eyes narrowed. You're blaming me now? No, he said slowly. I'm realizing things. She laughed sharply. Don't tell me you're still in love with her. Daniel didn't answer. That silence said everything. Sandra's face twisted with anger. She's using you. This is all a setup. Daniel shook his head. No, she doesn't need to. The next morning, the audit began. Daniel sat across from 3 compliance officers, sweat forming at his temples as they flipped through documents. Every pause felt like a verdict waiting to be announced. Can you explain this transaction? One asked calmly. Daniel swallowed. It was approved under my authority. And this? Another asked. He hesitated. It was necessary at the time. They exchanged a look and continued writing. Hours later, Daniel walked out drained, his career hanging by a thread. Across the city, Amina stood by the window of her office, watching clouds drift slowly across the sky. Her hand rested on her stomach, feeling the gentle movement inside her. Mrs. Adami entered quietly. He's being audited thoroughly. Amina nodded. I expected that. There's something else, Mrs. Adami said carefully. The board wants you to make a public appearance. Amina turned. Already. They believe it will stabilize the company. Amina closed her eyes briefly. And Daniel, he'll be there. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. Then so will I. The press conference was scheduled for that afternoon. Cameras flashed as executives took their seats. Whispers rippled through the crowd when Amina entered, her presence commanding attention without effort. Daniel stood at the side of the room, watching her from a distance. She looked radiant. Not just powerful, peaceful. When she stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. Thank you for coming, Amina began, her voice steady. Change can be unsettling. But transparency builds trust. Daniel listened closely, hanging on to every word. I am aware that my appointment has raised questions, she continued. What matters now is how we move forward. She paused briefly. With integrity, Daniel felt the word land directly on him. As the conference ended, reporters shouted questions, but Amina exited calmly. Surrounded by security, Daniel followed at a distance, his heart pounding. Outside, as she approached her car, he called out softly. She stopped but didn't turn. I didn't know you were capable of this, he said. She turned slowly. Neither did you think I was capable of surviving. Daniel stepped closer. I was wrong. Yes, she replied. You were. His voice trembled. I want to fix things. Amina looked at him, then not with hatred. Not with hope, but with clarity. You can't fix what you refuse to protect, she said quietly. He nodded, tears stinging his eyes. Is the baby really mine? Amina placed a hand over her stomach. The baby will know who showed up. Daniel stood there as the car door closed and drove away. For the first time, he understood the full weight of his loss. Power hadn't changed. A minute it had revealed her and stripped him bare. Daniel stood there long after the car disappeared, the city noise swallowing his silence. He finally understood that this wasn't the end of his punishment, it was only the beginning of the truth he could no longer escape. Because what Daniel didn't know yet was that the audit would uncover secrets even he had forgotten, and the board was already preparing decisions that would change his life forever. Meanwhile, sat in the back seat, one hand resting on her stomach, knowing the hardest choice was still ahead, whether justice meant destroying the man who betrayed her, or becoming something stronger than his regret. And when the truth finally comes out, not everyone will survive the fallout. What happens next will shock everyone.